I rerolled a new character in Path of Exile 2 and decided to try to get from level 60 to level 90 in just under an hour. This might sound crazy, but I had a few ideas on how to make it happen. To level up in Path of Exile 2, we need to gain experience, which means killing as much stuff as possible, as efficiently as possible, and there's a few ways we can accelerate this process. Firstly, more monsters means more experience. There's a couple of ways to get more monsters in our map. Firstly, scaling pack size. This can be done with some points on the Atlas passive tree, but also by using an Omen of Chaotic Quantity to make sure that all modifiers that roll on our waystones grant increased pack size. Another way is to add additional packs to the maps with league mechanics like Breach and Abyss, but also by running cleansed maps that contain additional packs of monsters. Next, we can also increase our experience gain with, well, increased experience gain. Precursor tablets can roll 10 to 20% increased experience gain, and we can use 3 of these on each waystone, giving us 60% increased experience gain in every single map. On top of that, we can increase the effects of our Precursor tablets. Remnants of Power on the Atlas passive tree grants a 1 in 5 chance for double effects of tablets, meaning that on average, every 5th map we run will grant us 150% increased experience. Next, in Kima, we can select a permanent buff to grant us 5% increased experience gain for a set of rather hefty downsides. There's also a helmet called Cornithorm that can grant us another 5%, 6% when corrupted, although I decided not to use this one. But that's not all. Monster Effectiveness is a new mechanic in Path of Exile 2 that provides more monster life, more quantity of item drops, also increased experience granted. We can find this mod on tablets, but also in a couple of points on the tree. We have Zeshed Madness and From Out of the Pits. So with Breach and also Abyss, we're getting increased effectiveness, which converts into increased experience. Another thing to bear in mind is that rare and magic monsters grant an increased amount of experience, so by having more of these with points on the tree and with map mods, we can try to get even more of these in our maps for more experience. But there's another element of experience gain that's really important to bear in mind. Higher level monsters grant more experience, but there's a catch. If you're too many levels above or below the area level, you'll start receiving a heavy experience penalty. From work done by Crimson Cast and Lundberger, we now know that the XP penalty threshold is 3 plus 1 level per 16 levels of your character. Guy That Dies has a great written guide on this that I'll link below, but this means that at level 60, we don't want to be more than 6, 7 levels above or below the area level, and we want to run as high a tier map as possible. I actually wasn't aware that this information had been uncovered when I ran this, but this is what it would look like if I'd actually planned ahead. So at level 60, tier 2 waystones are going to be ideal. Level 65, that's when we can hop into waystone tier 8, and then plus 1 tier zone level per character level. Level 72, we can start running waystone tier 15s, and then by level 75, we're able to run area level 82 zones and still get full XP. This would be a tier 16 map, irradiated and cleansed with another plus 1 level. This means that we would be able to run prop 75 to 89 without any major XP penalties. So with all of this in mind, let's find out, is it possible to gain 30 levels in just under an hour? I started out strong with 3 experience tablets in tier 1 maps. The experience was coming thick and fast, just how I like it, and within 3.5 minutes, I was already at level 65. At this pace, I was absolutely set to destroy this challenge. One other thing I tried in this first map was the brutal lessons on the passive tree. This makes it so that map bosses grant 50% increased experience. Thought this might provide a big boost, but well, the amount of time it takes to kill a difficulty 4 map boss made me immediately realize that this is about as effective as most defensive points on the warrior side of the tree. In fact, it might even be more efficient to just skip the map boss, but that might mean using a Grand Project tablet around a tower to avoid breaking your Atlas. And here was our first major mistake. So after my first map, I was level 65 and I decided to run a tier 2 map. Taking the XP calculation into account, I was actually safe to run map tiers 7 or higher, so I should have been running a tier 8 or maybe even tier 9 map. However, due to my lack of confidence, both as a Path of Exile player, With this build, and I guess just in general, I decided to opt for the safer route. 4 minutes later, by the end of the map, I was 3 levels higher, so I couldn't complain, but I know that this would have been way more if I had run a tier 9 map like I should have. Oh, and by the way, the opposite of gaining XP is dying. Dying nets you a 10% XP loss and is basically the opposite of what we need to be doing right now. Hopping into the third map, we're going from level 68, and yeah, I decided to run a tier 3. At level 68, ideally, I should have been running at least a tier 11 map to gain maximum XP. That being said, my gear was kind of bad, and I didn't think I'd be able to handle it. These maps are hard. They're jam-packed with tons of tough monsters, and they're coming at you hard and fast. Not in a fun way either. By the end of this map, I was level 71, and we still had more than 45 minutes on the clock. Well on pace. Now, this is an instance where planning ahead would have served me really well. I didn't have higher uncut skill gems prepared ahead of time, and I wasn't finding enough to make sure that my gems were keeping up with the area level. Gem levels in Path of Exile 2 are probably the most impactful way to increase your damage easily, which is a great game design choice that makes for incredibly engaging itemization and character building. Now, hopping onto our fourth map, this is when I really began to notice just how good Breach was for XP. This one Breach granted me almost 2 whole levels. When I was busy setting this up, I noticed that Breach tablets with increased XP gain and a second good mod like effectiveness or increased number of rare monsters were incredibly expensive. And well, now I know why. The other thing with Breach though is that you need to have a character with very good clear speed, but unfortunately this Breach killed me, which is entirely the fault of the developers of course, probably also streamers and maybe also my parents. They stifled me during my upbringing, limiting the amount of time I was allowed to hone my gaming capabilities as a child. So yeah, definitely not my fault. But now let's hop into the fifth map. This was a Waystone tier 5, area level 69. Haha, nice. Yes, at least it's not the other number that's really annoying. By the way, another great way to power up your character is with shrines. Not only can these provide a really big damage or speed boost, but enlightening shrines also exist. These grant 100% increased experience gain for 90 seconds. With the seasonal blessing and prayer for wisdom points, this means that we're finding more enlightening shrines, and when we do, they're actually granting 150% increased experience gain for well over 2 minutes, which is far longer than I usually last. By the end of this map, we're hitting level 75 and hopping into number 6. Now, for the 6th map, I know you've all been thinking, why don't I just run Untainted Paradise? Well, I wanted this to be a replicable. I wanted this to be a replicable strategy, and you can't always rely on finding Untainted Paradises on the map. Also, these maps are full of those asshole crabs, and I don't want to be anywhere near them, so Untainted Paradise, it's cool, but it didn't actually give me that much XP compared to some of the other maps I was running. By the end of this, level 76, hopping onto the 7th map, and at level 76, after dutifully neglecting to upgrade any of the pre-prepared gear that I had carefully laid out for myself, I finally decided to stop being a coward and run a higher tier map. Now we're in tier 14 maps. This is area level 78, which means I was almost in the sweet spot for XP gain. And hey, guess what? My XP started skyrocketing again. I rapidly jumped from level 76 to level 77 before dying, but this did give me hope for the challenge. I rolled another tier 14 map, determined to somehow stay alive and fly on to level 90. But now hopping into the 8th map, finally we hit the big time. We got the double Precursor tablet effect on a tier 14 map, meaning this map is granting us 156% increased experience. At this point, I was down to the wire. There were only 20 minutes left on the clock, and with 13 levels to go, if I was going to make it happen, now was the time. My XP gain was absolutely soaring. If Jonathan Rogers saw this, he'd say, interesting, in that absolutely terrifying way that he does. This map alone granted me 9 levels in just about 11 minutes, and at this point I was on pace to shatter this arbitrary challenge that I set for myself retroactively after recording all this footage. In that last map, we went from level 77 to level 86, just 4 levels to go to reach my goal. and only 10 minutes left on the clock. For the final push, I decided to hop into a tier 15 map with +1 monster area level from a cleanse zone and an irradiated tablet, making this an area level 81, well within the safe XP zone. I was very confident that I could blast out these last 4 levels in just a matter of minutes, but then disaster struck. I died. If only I could have somehow planned ahead. Well, gotta keep going. I hopped into my next map, area level 79, still within the XP safe zone, and another death. It was all falling apart. I decided to drop the map by 1 tier. I had only 3 minutes left, but I figured I could push on and make it happen. Level 87, 3 levels to go, 3 minutes left on the clock. Even with a breach and multiple abysses in the map, the XP was moving quickly, but not quickly enough. And, well, this is the moment that I failed. I hit the 1 hour mark at only level 87, but I decided to keep pushing just to see how long it would take me to get to level 90. 10 minutes later, I hit level 88. 2 levels to go, but then another death, knocking us back another 10% XP. I kept grinding and grinding, determined not to emasculate myself in front of an imaginary audience that probably still isn't even watching this far into the video, but my XP was crawling. I just kept dying, the challenge was already failed, and I was losing hope. But then finally, out of the depths of my ADHD haze, I remembered the gear that I had prepared for myself ahead of time. This whole time, I'd been running on the same gear I'd been running in the campaign and wondering, why was I struggling? Why was I dying in these endgame tier maps? If only my more than 2 decades of ARPG experience were enough to overcome this insurmountable challenge, grant me the basic ability of functional recall, perhaps I could have succeeded. But alas, it was too little, too late. I donned my pre-prepared gear, shamefully, and pushed ahead for the final grind. This really was the final push. Mentally, I'd given up. Physically, my fragile body was exhausted after sitting in the same spot and slightly moving my wrists a few times a second for an hour straight. An hour and 29 minutes in the challenge, finally hitting level 89. Just 1 level to go, but with already 30 minutes past the imaginary cutoff I'd made for myself. How had I got here? I was level 86, just 50 minutes into the challenge, and now only 3 levels higher after 40 minutes? It didn't really make sense, but I pushed on, not giving up. And finally it happened. Level 90, 1 hour and 47 minutes after I began. Now at this point, there is one thing I need to admit. I didn't actually plan for this to be a challenge ahead of time. I threw this together really quickly, just a few tablets, a really rough plan, and I actually still expected this to take a few hours. But after seeing how well it was going at the start, I actually wondered, could I get this done in an hour? And yes, I think you could. I mean, I didn't, but you could. Even though this was a failure, I still learned a ton of it and can reflect to make sure that if I do it again, which I will, I'll easily be able to achieve this goal. Realistically, I think if you prepared everything right, solo, you could probably get this done in like 30 minutes, maybe even a bit less. So let's go over all of the mistakes and what could have been done better here. Firstly, preparing gear ahead of time and taking note at which level you can equip that gear is really important. Don't be like me running around in an area level 81 map with your campaign gear. You're just going to be punished for it, and rightfully so. Next, preparing your uncut gems and supports is very important. If you can remember the level breakpoints for gem levels, you should always be leveling up your gems when you reach those levels. I neglected this, my damage fell off, and I was punished for it. The next thing, XP and map tiers. Now that we understand the XP penalty curve thanks to the work of Crimson and Lundberger and Guy That Dies, you can now prepare maps ahead of time to make sure that you're staying in that XP sweet spot. Of course, this means that you'll have a much greater challenge, but if you do prepare all your gear ahead of time, you'll be able to tackle these higher tier maps at the appropriate level. And lastly, Breach is really good for XP. If your build can handle it, investing in those expensive Breach tablets instead of Abyss would probably make this go way faster. I was thinking, ooh, I can't afford these breach tablets and I'm probably gonna have to buy like 20 of them. In reality, I think if you prepared this ahead of time, you can get this done in about 10 maps. You can also be greedy and complete a tower next to a cleanse zone and then use a grand project on that tower so that you can ignore the map boss, but also then fish for the double tablet effect so that you're only running those 150% XP maps. That is mega try hard, but like I said, I think you could get this done in under 30 minutes, and if you did everything just right, I'm sure it could happen. I'd love to see anyone else try, so if you do, please record it and let me know. And there is, of course, one other thing to address. We're in patch 0.4 right now, and there is the temple, which of course you could get rushed through by a friend, probably get to level 90 in about 14 seconds. But I wanted this to be a solo journey that could be used in future patches too, so that's why I did it this way myself. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. It was a fun one to put together. And if you try this yourself, also let me know how it goes. And if you have any other tips for power leveling in the endgame. Maybe I can even write a guide on what I learned here and some tips for power leveling a second character through the endgame. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Join the Discord. You can become a patron of the channel and follow me on Twitch as well for live streams. Oh, and as for the character, don't worry about it. I'm not playing it anymore. That's going to be it. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Stay safe. Catch you in the next video, and bye-bye.